movie's success can live and die by its marketing, and that starts with the trailers. A good one can put bums in seats for even the worst of films, as it was with 2016 Suicide Squad, while a bad one can see it suffer like Jennifer's Body. As such, who doesn't love a good trailer? Over the last few weeks, there have been an abundance of teasers released, with some being for what promised to be among the biggest films of the next few years. Hell, there's one or two here that may well have just made the first step towards bringing in $1 billion. So with that in mind, I'm Ellie for Whatculture, and let's take a look at these recently released must-see movie trailers. Oh, and by the way, all of these trailers will be linked in the description down below, so you can check them out in all their full glory once you finish this video, of course. Let's start with Toy Story 5. If we're being honest, there can't have been that much cool for Toy Story 5 over the last few years. Since the impeccable Toy Story 3, there has been the disappointing Lightyear and Toy Story 4, which in itself wasn't a bad film, but it did lessen the impact of what would have been a perfect trilogy without it. Yet in 2024, Toy Story 5 was announced along with Frozen 3, and a year later, fans finally have a teaser trailer to sink their teeth into. Of course, everybody knows what the characters look like now, having known the core cast for 30 years. But this trailer did hint at what the bulk of the story will be about. Kids, namely Bonnie, losing interest in their toys in favor of technology and screens. Now, arguably, the bigger point of the footage is that Woody is somehow back with the rest of Bonnie's toys after saying what seemed to be a final goodbye in 2019. Yes, the franchise didn't need another entry. And yes, it does seem that Pixar just keeps throwing away these would-be perfect endings, but there is still something so wonderfully nostalgic about seeing the gang on screen once again. And it's bound to be as heartwarming and thought-provoking as ever. The Hunger Games: Sunrise on the Reaping. Let the 50th Hunger Games begin! 11 years after the last time audiences saw Katniss Everdeen and Peter Millark, and 3 after the somewhat underwhelming return to Panem with A Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes, will come another peek into the past, set 24 years before the first film. This will be the 50th Games and the second Quarter-Quell, the year where there were double the amount of tributes, one of which being District 12's Haymitch Abernathy. Played by Woody Harrelson previously, Joseph Zada will take over the mantle in what looks to be an exciting return for the franchise. A Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes attempted to make something of a protagonist out of President Snow, which was a non-starter of an idea to begin with. However, telling Haymitch's story immediately has more of an upside, particularly with the returning characters and the incredible cast that will bring them to life. Jesse Plemons, Elle Fanning, and Ralph Fiennes will join Zada to tell what looks to be an exciting and beautiful version of the story. The film was announced at the same time as the novel, which may have been a risk considering the book itself may have fallen flat. But fortunately, it looks as though this has the chance to pay off. The Devil Wears Prada 2. I am so excited for this one. There are so many legacy sequels that come decades after the original and become hard to get excited about. It's far more likely to tarnish a great film's legacy than add to it. But sometimes there is a ray of hope. Now, that's not to say that this will be another Top Gun Maverick, but the prospect of a sequel to The Devil Wears Prada 20 years in the making is one to get excited by. Particularly when you consider that Meryl Streep, Anne Hathaway, Emily Blunt, and Stanley Tucci are all returning. Of course, one of the most exciting aspects is seeing how Miranda Priestly and Andy Sachs will interact, and how their dynamic will have changed over the years, with the teaser trailer giving just the tiniest hint. When Andy enters the lift next to Miranda, Miranda moves aside to make some room, something she never would have dreamed about doing 20 years ago. While there is a sequel novel to The Devil Wears Prada, Revenge Wears Prada, The Devil Returns, it's unknown currently how closely, if at all, the film will follow it. And the fact that the sequel does not share the same title suggests that differences may be more than the similarities. But right now, it's enough to be excited that there is more devil to come. Moana. Not all the trailers on this list are here because they are good. In fact, in this instance, it is quite the opposite. It genuinely has to be seen to be believed just how pointless the upcoming live-action Moana remake appears to be. The original outing, wildly successful both critically and commercially, to be sure, will only be a decade old when the remake hits in 2026. Why are we remaking movies from just 10 years ago? And with Moana 2 only just releasing in 2024, Disney is really risking overexposure to the beloved Wayfinder. Yes, Moana is an amazing character, with an amazing story, but based on what the minute-long trailer footage showed, this story will be told exactly the same as it was 10 years ago. Every single shot has been lifted directly from the original film, which begs the question, why do it at all? It's not like the aesthetics on Moana were due for an upgrade, because it is one of the most beautifully animated Disney films there is. And if anything, any CGI that is less than utterly and completely flawless will be a downgrade, such as the design of Hey Hey, seen at the end of the trailer. Is this thing on? There are some stories, no matter how good they may be, that you would just never expect to have a big Hollywood movie made about them. As great of a comedian as John Bishop is, his beginnings in the industry are one of those stories. There aren't too many UK comedians that have broken America, and Bishop isn't one of them. His accent is often unintelligible for British people, let alone those across the pond, and yet his story is the inspiration behind Is This Thing On? Directed by Bradley Cooper and starring Will Arnett and Laura Dern, who will be joined on screen by Cooper himself, Is This Thing On has recently had a new trailer release, and it genuinely looks brilliant. Of course, the story revolves around the first steps of Arnett's Bishop-inspired Alex Novak into the world of comedy, but it will go so much deeper than that. The reason behind such a big change in his life was that he was going through a divorce and wanted to do anything instead of being at home alone. As a film about going through such a difficult time, the struggles of coping, and yes, an element of comedy involved as well, this could be a fun and emotional ride. Michael. Over the last decade or so, the musical biopic has become a huge trend in the film industry, with the likes of Bohemian Rhapsody, Rocketman, I Wanna Dance with Somebody, and Elvis telling the often dramatized stories of Freddie Mercury, Elton John, Whitney Houston, and Elvis, respectively. Realistically, it was only a matter of time before such a film was made about Michael Jackson. It is sure to be controversial and divisive, but Jackson is undeniably one of the biggest names in entertainment history, arguably the biggest, and it's hard to imagine tickets not selling for this one. There have already been off-screen issues surrounding Michael, as legal action from the Jackson estate has reportedly led to a complete change in the third act to omit any mention of the allegations made against him. That being said, the trailer has done a great job of promising what audiences can expect from such a biopic. In just 2 minutes, there are multiple different eras shown, played against some of Michael Jackson's greatest hits, and offering the first real look at Michael himself. Getting the right actor for such a monumental role could have been difficult, but it's hard to deny the masterstroke of casting Michael Jackson's own nephew, Jafar Jackson. Wuthering Heights. When a trailer is able to boast of telling the greatest love story of all time, it may pique the interest of some, but it also comes with its own pitfalls. Wuthering Heights is a perfect example of this. Yes, Emily Bronte's work is considered one of the greatest romantic stories of all time, but then it begs the question, why does it need retelling? And will a new version do the story itself justice? Based on the reaction to the new remake, the jury is still heavily out. Between the fact that both Jacob Elordi and Margot Robbie are far too old to play faithful versions of their characters, the decade age gap between them, and the filmmakers not being faithful to the dark-skinned description of Heathcliff from the source material, the film has a number of hurdles to overcome. Unfortunately, the general reaction to the trailer's recent release has done little to ease any minds. Elordi and Robbie may be at the top of their games right now, but it will take more than that to appease fans of the novel, many of whom are already critical that the film will focus only on the romantic side of the story and not the deeper aspects. Yes, this is only a trailer with just 2 minutes of footage, but what else is it supposed to achieve other than giving a feel for what the whole thing will be like? The Super Mario Galaxy movie. Following the wild and unpredicted success of the first film, another Super Mario Bros. Movie was known to have been in the works since last year. But it wasn't until recently that it was officially given a title as a direct sequel to Illumination and Nintendo's 2023 effort. Even more recent has come the trailer. The Super Mario Galaxy movie will share the same name as the Nintendo Wii game from 2007. Although, since it will follow directly from the first film, it's difficult to tell just how faithful it will be to the game. Bowser is shown to be returning, still in his shrunken form, still as obsessed with Peach as ever, and still harboring a rivalry with Mario. Luigi and Toad will be returning too, though Seth Rogen's Donkey Kong is widely expected to be absent. That may be for the best, as there will need to be some room made for the newcomers, Brie Larson's Princess Rosalina and Benny Safdie's Bowser Jr. Then, though omitted from the trailer, there is the inevitable appearance of Yoshi, after his tease in the first movie's post-credit sting. Wake Up Dead Man, a Knives Out mystery. Back in 2019, who could have predicted that Rian Johnson, coming off the back of arguably the most hated Star Wars movie of all time, would be about to kick off one of the greatest murder mystery franchises of all time? That's not hyperbole, as Knives Out was that good. Glass Onion perhaps fell short of the lofty expectations set by its outstanding predecessor, but it was still a great outing. However, based on the trailer, Wake Up Dead Man may not just be the darkest of the series yet, but it may also be the best. As with the previous two films, the ensemble cast is ludicrous, boasting names like Andrew Scott, Kerry Washington, Josh Brolin, Glenn Close, Mila Kunis, Jeremy Renner, and more. Daniel Craig's Blanc will return to solve the case of who killed Josh Brolin's character. Though with a name like Wake Up Dead Man, it's hardly going to be as straightforward as that. The trailer focused on the dark, macabre elements of the film, as well as some of the more lightheartedness, with Glenn Close getting upset about graffiti-covered spaceships that absolutely were not spaceships. This is going to be a fun ride, full of twists and turns, as Johnson has seemingly found his cinematic calling. And finally, Project Hail Mary. The Martian was a huge success back in 2015 as a funny and poignant story based on Andy Weir's novel of the same name, revolving around Matt Damon's Mark Watney being stranded on Mars. However, this may not be the best Weir adaptation for long. Project Hail Mary will be a similar space romp, though with a lot more of the story set on Earth, and has the opportunity to be just as beautifully life-affirming as the book from which it is based. Ryan Gosling is an inspired casting as Ryland Grace, the teacher sent to space in order to save the planet, and he will get to flex his comedic and dramatic muscles all at the same time. The recently released second trailer improved on the first, though one point of contention shared even by Andy Weir himself was the decision to include Rocky in the marketing. His appearance was a huge surprise in the book, and there was no moment so thrilling and gripping as when Ryland heard the unexpected knock on the side of his ship. That being said, the movie was always going to be about more than just a surprise alien, and it will be fine without that aspect to lean on.